Hey everybody, this is Barry here from the Brewed Palate. I'm here with the Augie Carton, the founder of Carton Brewery here at his brewery in New Jersey. Actually, my mom offered me to let her take her car so we can come to a brewery to sell. My wife and I can come to a brewery to celebrate our anniversary. So
happy anniversary!
I figured I'd check out a New Jersey brewery for a change instead of covering only New York, and come down to a brewery who I've enjoyed their beers for quite a while. So I guess. I guess you could tell about the history of the brewery, and you're coming up on 5 years. So what does that mean for you, and any new special things that are going on because of the growth over the past 5 years?
So nothing unique for the 5 years except looking at what we've done. Carton kind of makes its mission to do off the beaten craft, unique, weird stuff. And 5 years is a nice mark to look back on all the weird stuff we've done over 5 years, and it's fun. We did it. We were Jersey's first canning brewery,
Right.
so we kind of made the focus of 5 years what we've canned and what we haven't, and I guess it's kind of rewarding. It's kind of neat just to look back at the steps you've made along the way, and what you've done, and what you're still doing, and what you want to do again, and what you still haven't got to. So the 5 year mark is a nice mark for checking in on the mission, if we're still doing what we said we'd do, and I think we are. I think we're still creating new flavors and not following trends.
Right. I mean, a big part of your motto is like beer is cuisine. Mm-hmm. So has that changed over time, or has the mission stuck?
It's I think that's where we get our inspiration from. I think everybody that brews. There's a million ways to come to brewing, and there's a million different things that inform the choices you make. At the beginning, we were doing something that wasn't done. There weren't session IPAs. We were trying to make a session beer that drank like a big double. So how we did that uniquely, and why I think Boat still is a different beer than most of those beers, is because we conceived it through the lens of cuisine, right? The parts of flavor that can be constructed in different ways, and we organized them to achieve our goals. And then jump to 5 years later, we are actually mimicking food experience in a beer. It's called Rub, and it's a smoked porter. Very little amount of smoked malts, but we used 4 different smokes. We used an oak smoked wheat, a cherrywood smoked barley, a mesquite smoked barley, and a beechwood smoked barley, and we mixed them up to be about 5% of the total bill. So there's just a tailing smokiness to it, and it's kind of a mixed smoke, as if you were, doing a hickory cherry smoked barbecue. And then we added my dry rub, which we tweaked to work in the beer. And hey, can you grab me a rub?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, would you mind?
Whoa, Augie, it's not like that.
Top secret. That's right, dirty. So basically what we're trying to capture is that moment when you've been barbecuing all day and you've been drinking boat beers or whatever your favorite session beer is, and then at the end of the day you sit down and you're done eating and you've got all that chocolate and cayenne and cumin and onion and garlic and smoke going on in your mouth, and you drink a porter. Let me hold that. You taste this and tell me what you think. And so, so ideally it's kind of all those flavors of a day of barbecuing and beer drinking in one little beer, so you don't have to do the whole day of barbecuing and beer drinking. And so that's the game we played for the anniversary. This is our...
It definitely has the smoke, that meatiness that you get at like a Rauschenberg, but it finishes with a lot of chocolate. Like you don't get it up front, but then you get the taste left on your palate, it really...
Exactly. So my dry rub is an adaptation, a version.
It's out when we can.
Go ahead and drink it. It's an adaptation. It's a version of the Feta Sow dry rub from Brooklyn, New York, and I use chocolate and coffee and onions, and I do a couple things differently. I use light sugar instead of dark sugar. I use coffee instead of espresso. I use chocolate instead of half the sugar. I add chocolate to it. And the recipe's on the can. If anybody gets a can, here's my dry rub recipe that's actually in the beer. So you can make it at home. You're a home brewer, right?
Yeah.
So there you go. We gave you the recipe.
I like to cook as well, so maybe I'll have to make some steaks with the rub and then pair it with it.
When you do that, up your salt, sugar,
We had to knock the
onion
salt-
and garlic. We had to pull those in a little for the
we knocked
beer.
the salt down significantly.
And you could definitely taste it also in the aftertaste. That like it's like kind of evolving on the palate, and you can kind of taste there's like some kind of rub in there, some kind of thing that you have never really tasted before.
That's what we're hoping for.
That's in the
That's
beer.
what we do. And like I said, so if you drink a can or a couple cans of this, hopefully it does that all night, right? Because things will come out. Like the onion will come up front, garlic will come up front, the cayenne pepper shows a little, and then the chocolate shuts that down. But ultimately, like all carton beers, we're not trying to do that thing some people are doing in craft right now where we're trying to make it taste exactly like barbecue. What we want it to taste like is a beer that evokes the barbecue feeling, right? Like,
Right.
like I said, when you're done with this can, which I think we'll stop stealing from you now, hopefully it'll give you that feeling of, oh yeah, it does feel like I drank beers and barbecued all day. And if that happened, then we nailed it.
Right. I mean, for me, like I actually grew up in New Jersey, in Essex County, West Orange. But I got into craft beer about 10 years ago when I moved to New York City. So I always had this like kind of like, oh, New Jersey craft beer isn't that great. You know, it's not as big as New York City. New York City is always growing. But now, over the past, let's say, since you guys started, it's been exploding. So you just give us, a kind of overall, long story short, view of what New Jersey craft beer is nowadays, because
Well,
so,
it's different. Well, yes and no.
It definitely precipitated it.
It's true. It's true. Well, that's my brewer Brendan, who is definitely right. There's a law change that happened in 2012 that is definitely the most significant thing. I think when we started in 2011, there were 13 breweries, 4 or 5 brew pubs, give or take.
right.
And they were all doing what they were doing. And then in 2011, there was an uptick. I think the 3 most significant breweries to open in 2011 were us, Cape May, and Kane. And we're before this law change that Brendan just mentioned. So we opened at a size where you had to do all your business off premise because you weren't allowed to sell beer on premise outside of a single growler or 2 growlers. There were all these limitations on what you could do. So we opened up with that business plan. In 2012, the legislature passed a new law that made it much more reasonable and a little more in line with the rest of America, where you could do samplings and tell people what you're about and get them tasting and sell them a keg of beer to take home and put on their kegerator and have a picnic. So after 2012, you see a lot of smaller breweries that's the business model, where they're making their flavors, they're having people into their shop, they're serving them their beers, and that's the business model. And that's great because it's given a great jump in creativity where everybody kind of had to make beers that could sit on a draft line of 8 and be, you had to own a space in a draft line, and you had to be a category people understood, and you had to be a pale, or you had to be I guess IPAs were coming in vogue or kind of in the middle of their wave at that point. But, you had to be a stouter, you had to be a pale, you had to be a lager, you had to be whatever, and you had to make enough of them to sell in enough bars to make money. Now, it's much more welcoming of that homebrewer approach where, screw it, you want to make this beer, you make it once. You serve it in your tap room, 5, 6, 7, there's people charging way too much, but, there's people charging fair. You have a pint of beer for your couple dollars, and if people like it, you make it again. And if people don't like it, you don't make it again. Mm-hmm. And since we opened in 2011, since that 2012 law change, I think there's now about 60 breweries in New Jersey.
Wow.
And, you grew up in Essex, which is the most densely populated part of the most densely populated state.
Right.
But you know that there's enough people in New Jersey to support 700 breweries. Like, we could have 1,000 of our own.
Right.
We just need the laws to continue to get more sensible and encourage homegrown creativity. And the better the laws get, the more breweries come online. And I think at this point, in most of New Jersey, you're not more than half an hour from a brewery now. And that's great, right? That's the hometown pride you can have.
Right.
We try to be the hometown pride for our hometown. And we like to consider our hometown Manhattan to Philly and all of Jersey in between.
Right.
And that's what we work on.
I mean, before we get to the breakdown of like the different, beers that are brewed here, it's like because you're known for a lot for your hoppy beers. I kind of a lot of conversation, especially in the homebrew community, nowadays about the New England style IPA, the Heady, the Hill Farmstead, the Trillium, the Treehouse, and that's kind of started a whole new, revolution in craft beer, where it used to be the East Coast IPA versus the West Coast. The East Coast is more malt forward, and the West Coast is more dry and crisp. But now the lines are blurred everywhere, and everyone's brewing their own version of, what they, call the ideal hop flavor experience. So, what's your view of the current state of, hoppy beers, and how do you use that to brew your own hoppy beers?
I hate to be trite about it, but I can never separate the idea of big IPAs and the commonality in their aromatics to a pot. I really do. I think as the laws get more sane about marijuana in America and marijuana gets more developed and cultured, those cultivars become more flavorful and different. You have people tasting those, and beer follows that same line, right? The guys growing hops and cultivars are, they're definitely learning alongside, and there's parallels in these aromas and what you can get. And I've always made the joke that there is a regional imprint to IPAs, and it's what the local weeds smell like, right? So that's why you have San Diego, Colorado, Portland, and Vermont as these big, crazy IPA states. Think about where people go watch fish shows. You know what I mean? It's just there's those cultures, and there's a crossover. And I think people make their beers. I think there's a local taste to things, and I think there's a big crossover between those two. And I think people make their beers taste that way. So to pay attention to the New England thing, it's people pulling back from bitterness. It's funny because I know Heady gets credit for it. Heady to me is still more a classic IPA than the current ones. Heady isn't not bitter, whereas most of the current vogue, if there's a vogue in IPAs, is these all aromatics, no bitter IPAs, which I think means you're not an IPA anymore. It's just IPA now means hoppy. So everybody just puts IPA where they mean hoppy, and you'll notice we very carefully try to call hoppy beers and not call them IPAs, because I think hoppy means the same thing these days, and I just think it's more accurate. But I think what people think of as New England are these aromatic bombs, and they're cool. They're super fun to drink. I mean, when they're fresh and they're new, they're wonderful. And, we fool around with them. We make beers that fall into those super aromatic bomb beers, too. But if Carton's going to call it an IPA, it's got to have some decided bitterness. It's got to have some drive. And it's got to be a long-haul beer. I believe, I like our IPAs as they mature and integrate and get older. And if you give them no bitterness to lean on, they're not going to age. So I know right now the vogue is for bombed-out IPAs fresh. I love drinking them. We make them every now and then, and we drink them. But we just don't call them IPAs because I think IPA needs to keep a foot in a true meaning and not just become an industry term for hoppy. Watch your back. But yeah, I love Treehouse. Me and Dean get real crunk every time I see each other, and I love their beers, so there's nothing wrong with them. I just think it's funny the industry insists that they're the same thing as Pliny or what was an IPA, an American IPA 12 years ago.
I mean, it's almost created its own sub-style. Right. So
why not just give it a new name? I guess is what I'm saying.
I just I guess you could call it New England hoppy beer. Yeah. It's a New England IPA or New England Pale Ale. Or just
a Vermont Pale.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I just don't know why. And I get it's, for me, it's, marketing. I know that marketing's a thing, but sometimes it gets lazy. And they've just made, to put Belgian yeast in a beer and call it a Belgian IPA just doesn't make any sense to me. Just call it a hoppy Belgian, right? So those things exist and they're fun, and I just don't think you need to lean on IPA to translate hops. But I don't think that's brewers. I think that's marketers. I think it's people saying IPA means hoppy. If we call it an IPA, they'll know it's hoppy. It just makes our job easier. You know what I mean? But I just don't think we need to be doing that. I don't think it hurts anything.
So I guess you give the breakdown of what your lineup is throughout the year and how specialty things come out.
It's that's hard to say. We there's 5 beers we always make. We make Quote, which is our super hoppy session beer for when we want to drink a ton of hoppy beers and don't want to get too wasted too fast. We make O-Dub, which is the big double IPA, kind of balance some real sweetness against some real bitterness, against some real aromatics, against some real, dryness. Then we make a session stout for if you're in the mood to drink malty beers that aren't hops. That we call Carton of Milk. So it's a little bit of lactose sugar added to a very, very bitter beer. We if you're going to be interesting for a whole session, if you're going to drink one beer 8 times in a day, it can't be too smooth and flat and easy because it gets boring. So what we do with that one is we do a super, super, super bitter tiny malt bill, and then we just put some lactose in it, treat it like cream and coffee, right? So it takes the edges off. And just flattens a little without sweetening it. Drink a ton of those if you're. That's like my soccer watching beer. I'm gonna watch soccer. I drink milk. And then BDG, which is kind of our table-friendly brown. It's just meant to be good, middle-of-the-road beer flavors. It just matches well to food and doesn't get in the way. And then we do Hop Pun and Red Rye, depending on what time of year it is, and it's just 2 kind of more amber hoppy beers for to be in the middle of the drinking range. Hop Pun, much more fruity for summer. Red Rye, much more spicy for winter. And we break them up. So those are the 5 ways to do it. And then specials are, sometimes the specials just we got a new hop and we wanted to make a Big Dumb Pale, so we made a Big Dumb Pale. Sometimes we got an inspiration. Right now we're cooking on the Tippy, an extreme beer. It's a riff on a Reuben, pastrami on rye with a pickle. Like I said, rub was one we did last summer when I was barbecuing every day. We worked out this recipe. And it's just, it's me and the boys play our games and we come up with our new ideas and we brew and we make some twice, we make some just once, we make some 50 times.
And is there any big expansions coming now that you're 5 years?
So, we've been trying to expand for 4 years. We've been at the capacity of this building from month 6. We ran to our 5-year business plan month 6. But we're in the middle of our hometown. You're here, you saw. We're right on the main street of our hometown. And that's important to us. So figuring out a way to expand and stay here is tough. Usually breweries are on the outskirts of a town in an industrial complex. So we have taken over the building next door. We will be knocking it down and building a brand new, modern, functioning brewery. And that's proven to be a hard task. There's just weird nuances to being in the middle of a town that just don't exist in an industrial park, like when you have to build an industrial building. But it keeps us in our town and it keeps us close to our community, and that's, we think, very important to who we are and where our creativity stems from.
So we're going to go walk around the brewery, but just to sign off, I want to thank Augie for taking some time. I know he came from his kids and his wife on a Sunday to chat with me. So if you guys are in the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, I know you're a little bit in Philly too, try to get a hold of some of Carton's great beers. They're all really nice balance, really flavorful, really sessionable, really creative. And yeah, so as home brewers, this is one brewery to follow because they're always molding their beers after some really cool ideas, and they take our creativity, which we have the ability to do on a small scale, and bring it to their customers. So
thank you. That's nice to say. I appreciate it. No, thanks for coming in. Happy anniversary.
Thank
That's
you.
cool. Go enjoy some beers.